Hi, my name is Regina Rochefort, and I'm an ecologist and the lead of the Cascades Butterfly Project. I'm very honored to be here with you today for the Washington's National Park Fund virtual auction. I'm especially honored because this year we're celebrating volunteerism and stewardship. Before I tell you a little bit about myself, I'd like to thank all of you for your support of the national parks. I'd also like to thank Lori Ward and the entire staff of the Washington's National Park Fund. Your support makes it possible for us to protect our national parks now and for future generations. I've probably only met a few of you, so I'd like to give you a brief synopsis of my career with the National Park Service. In April of 2018, I retired from North Cascades National Park Service Complex after a 40-year career with the federal government. My first positions were as a forest technician with the U.S. Forest Service in Oregon while I was in graduate school. Then, in January of 1979, I received a position as a fire ecologist doing research in Big Cypress National Preserve in South Florida. From there, I moved south to Everglades National Park for my first permanent position as a botanist. And it was there that I met my husband, Steve Gibbons, when he was working in hydrology research. In 1984, we moved to Mount Rainier National Park, where I was the park's first botanist and where both of our sons were born when we lived in Longmire. After about 15 years, I moved north to North Cascades National Park as a science advisor for the park and for the 6 other parks in our network. When I was at Everglades National Park, we didn't work a lot with volunteers, but when I moved to Mount Rainier National Park, I learned about the power of volunteers. My first assignment at Mount Rainier was to take the few small restoration projects that were ongoing and expand them into a large park-wide restoration and revegetation program. At the time, we had a small vacant greenhouse, and there really wasn't much knowledge on how to grow native plants because they weren't popular commercially. After a few years learning how to grow native plants, we received a large donation that enabled us to build the Trinca greenhouse. And soon after that, we were able to produce 30,000 to 60,000 native plants per year. We used these plants to restore the old Paradise Campground, the old Sunrise Campground, and some of the 1,000 social trails in the Paradise area. As you can imagine, Julie Hover, David Palumbo, and Belle and I could never have gotten the 30,000 to 60,000 plants in the ground by ourselves. We were lucky enough to have an army of volunteers who helped us with that. When I moved up to North Cascades National Park, I once again worked with volunteers on several park bio-blitzes. And then, of course, the Cascades Butterfly Project. The Cascades Butterfly Project is staffed entirely by volunteer community scientists. In this program, we monitor the effects of climate change on subalpine ecosystems by tracking butterfly abundances and plant flowering times. And we're currently in our 11th year. When I retired, it took a little bit of effort for me. I loved my job. I believed in the mission of the National Park Service. I liked the people I worked with. I felt a part of a family where I received personal support and intellectual stimulation. I really wasn't sure how I was going to cope with retiring. But once I started volunteering, guess what? I found I loved it. I had a larger network of friends and colleagues. I was with people who believed in the National Park Service and its mission as much as I did, and as much as my fellow NPS employees did. When I was at Mount Rainier National Park, I went back to University of Washington for my PhD, and my research focused on the effects of climate change on alpine and subalpine plant communities. So as you can imagine, with that background and just being a scientist, I think about climate change a lot. In 2000, the National Park Service started a national program on long-term inventory and monitoring of natural resources. In North Cascades, Mount Rainier, and Olympic National Parks, we also started this project. And for us, one of the most important stressors on national parks was climate change. We knew that climate change was going to continue to have a profound effect on our resources. And if we wanted to be the best stewards of these resources, we knew that we would need to track climate change and then use the data we were collecting to adapt our management strategies to these changing conditions. Unfortunately, we had a lot more questions than we had resources to answer these questions. And one of the questions that kept coming up was, how are pollinators going to respond to the warmer and drier climates that we know are being projected for the future? Unfortunately, this was a question we could not answer with the resources we had. So the Cascades Butterfly Project was born, and citizen scientists came to the rescue. To begin with, we needed a baseline species list, because how can you estimate change if you don't have a starting point? Working with Dr. John McLaughlin from Western Washington University and Dr. Dana Garrigan from Pacific Lutheran University, we started reviewing historic records to develop species lists. We found that prior to 2008, we could find records for Mount Rainier National Park of butterfly occurrences, but no abundances. But we really couldn't find any written records for the Northern Cascades. So again, the question came up, how can you estimate change if you don't have a starting point? And that became one of the first objectives of the program, to establish a species list. Starting in 2011, we established 10 survey sites across the 2 national parks, North Cascades and Mount Rainier, and the 2 national forests, Mount Baker Snoqualmie and Okanagan-Wenatchee National Forest. We surveyed these sites once or twice a week from snowmelt till the first freeze, generally mid-July till about Labor Day. Over the last 10 years, we've documented 57 species, 46 in North Cascades and 44 in Mount Rainier National Park. We've learned which species are most common, which are most abundant. We've learned that species abundances and species change from year to year, especially with weather. We found that in years like 2015, which was a very warm, dry year, following a winter with low snowpack, that the patterns that we see may be very indicative of what we expect with the warmer, drier climates in the future. National parks are great places to study climate change because generally weather is the most direct influence or overriding influence on our species, rather than habitat loss, which may be the story outside the parks. Recently, Dr. Matt Forrester from University of Nevada, Reno, published a study in which he and colleagues reviewed butterfly records for the last 40 years, and they found over the last 4 decades that butterfly abundances in the West have been decreasing. We don't know if we're seeing decreases in our national parks, and we don't know if we've lost some species or if new ones are going to come in. But I would say with 10 years of citizen science data, we're well on our way to being able to answer those questions. I love volunteering in national parks. I like doing the Butterfly Project because it gives me a mission while I'm hiking. I like to be able to collect data. I like to work with my fellow colleagues, my community scientists. I like to talk to people when I'm out on the trail. I like to talk to people about butterflies, about climate change, and the effects on subalpine ecosystems. But everybody has their own reason for volunteering. So I asked some of my fellow volunteer community scientists from the Cascades Butterfly Project if they would tell you about their ideas on why they volunteer for the national parks.
I find that the Cascade Butterfly Project offers a proactive way to engage in nature that is meaningful and it is thoughtful, and it extends beyond classifying and identifying species, but it also incorporates elements of environmental reform, environmental advocacy, and most importantly, community.
I volunteer because it gives me the opportunity each week to go out into the mountains, into nature, make observations and collect data, and watch the wildflowers bloom.
I volunteered at Rainier in many ways. I've monitored trails, amphibians, and wildflowers. In wintertime, I've helped rangers take visitors for a snowshoe walk.
And it was a great opportunity to learn more about climate change and then to share that information with visitors to the park.
It gives me a chance to learn more about the areas that I love to go hiking. I also feel like citizen science is an opportunity for everyone to contribute to research that is important for us.
Studying environmental science, so opportunities to tangibly learn in the field are always really exciting to me. And although I had no prior experience, I joined the Cascades Butterfly Project because I felt nothing but inclusivity from the start. It has familiarized me with the Pollard Walk, field survey method, its importance for precise data collection. I've also been able to practice my skills of species identification and how to distinguish between them.
I've been catching insects my whole life, so I was really happy to get to catch butterflies and release them at Mount Rainier.
And I feel like without volunteers from the general public, these are efforts that may not otherwise get funded.
It has allowed me to help protect one of America's most beautiful and vulnerable wildlife species, while at the same time supporting science. And lastly, it has also provided me with the dual opportunity to support my wife, Regina Rochefort.
So in closing, I'd like to thank all of you for your support on behalf of Mount Rainier, North Cascades, and Olympic National Parks. Stewardship and protection of our national parks is a responsibility we all share. And I think with your help, we're doing a pretty good job of it.